Hello everybody, today we're looking at how to set up Django with HTTPS on a Webdock VPS server with Nginx and Gunicorn. The tutorial, as you can see here, that I've followed to set up a production-ready HTTPS enabled secure website. I followed this tutorial, https://realpython.com /Django-Nginx-Gunicorn. We'll look at that in a second. Just a couple of things to point out. You may want to use or install tree. I find it really helpful. It helps you show whereabouts you are in the tree structure. It expands your directories and you can see what's what quite easily. If you're a real hardcore Linux user, you might want to also use tmux because you do tend to skip around between different directories. The other thing, in their example, you will see 2/3 of the way down, you will see they use change owner, chown, Ubuntu, :Ubuntu. So often the difficulty with following tutorials is when you start to stray away from their code and put in your own usernames and domain names, folder names, etc. So where possible, I've stuck with their names and I've changed the bare minimum. So the bare minimum that I had to change was the username of my VPS because it wasn't Ubuntu. I've changed the domain name because obviously that's not going to be the same as their example. And one other thing to notice, as you see I've highlighted here, I got a little bit of a model with the secret key, creating the secret key. Now this is the Django secret key. If you're not familiar with Django, Django has its own secret key and you can load that as an environment or store it as an environment variable and call it with os.environ. So yeah, just make sure you store it in /project. So let's have a look at the actual tutorial and what we that's the end result, by the way. So the tutorial starts off securely deploy a Django app with Gunicorn, Nginx, and HTTPS. Why do you have to do this? You have to do this because Nginx is a proper fully fledged web server. Gunicorn speaks Python, so it's effectively it's translating the Python language into something that Nginx can understand and serve as a traditional web server. So that's why you've got Gunicorn and Nginx. When you're developing, a bit like when you develop Flask, when you're developing Django, it's got its own development server, but it's not ready, or I don't know why it's not good enough for production. I think it's because it doesn't support asynchronous and so on and so on. So this link I'll put in the description. I'm not going to scroll all the way through it and talk all about it because that's quite pointless. You need to do it in your own in your own environment. When I mean own environment, on your own server really, because everything will be specific to what you're trying to do. Your domain name will be specific, your folder structure might be specific. But just follow this. If you follow this exactly, trust me, it does work. There's one or two places where I went wrong because these instructions, how many words, I don't know. This is, you see how small the scroll bar is. So yeah, just follow it exactly. If you've already got your own DNS, you can actually start about 1/3 of the way down. And just follow everything exactly. Don't skip or don't jump a step, because if you do, chances are all the rest of it will end in tears. So yeah, down here you get as far as deploying it without HTTPS. So that's the first step. Once you've got it working with Nginx, then you need to get Gunicorn working and get Gunicorn to talk to Nginx. And then here we go, replacing the WSGI server with Gunicorn. So the WSGI server is basically it's not a production. Do not use this server in a production setting. It has not gone through security audits or performance tests, and that's how it's going to stay. We're in the business of making web frameworks, not web servers, so improving this server to be able to handle a production environment is outside the scope of Django. And before anyone asks, am I selling out? Am I just jumping on the bandwagon of Django and using lots of frameworks? Because traditionally I try not to use frameworks, or I like writing things from scratch. This, unlike a lot of my tutorials that I've done in the past, which are kind of purely for learning and academic purposes and understanding concepts, this actually is ultimately for a production server. So I'm going to document it whilst also showing how you don't have to use Linode, Heroku, AWS, Azure, Google, as long as you can access a private server, a VPS, preferably with Ubuntu or a nice flavor of Linux on it. You can follow these steps and you can do everything you want yourself. So, and you don't have to use Docker. So you don't have to use Docker, don't have to use Heroku. Typically, those will be two things which you almost get lulled. You almost end up using by default. I've got a book here a book I had from a couple of years ago. You probably recognize this book, Python Crash Course. And it's actually got a really good chapter on, near the end, it's got a really good chapter on Django. And as I say, I'm not doing this because I want to become a Django expert. I'm doing this because I have a need to deploy a web server. And really, I had the choice of PHP or Django. So I thought, well, use Django. Let's try and learn some Django and see where it leads. And yeah. So this is not a tutorial on how to do everything perfectly. This is a video showing how I got something working and what I used to get it working. So I used this tutorial. I used Webdock.io, very fast servers based in Scandinavia and in North America, and very fast gigabit connection, an IPv4 address included. You've got access to everything. You can have root access. You've got SSH, FTP, MySQL. I think it's 3 backups per week, free of charge, or snapshots. It's exactly what you want if you want to be able to do whatever you want, if that makes sense. So that's a tutorial. This is the server I've used. That was Nginx. Don't need to see that anymore. And this is the end result. So let's just refresh. I've zoomed in a lot, but I bought a domain name. I enabled SSL and I used something called certbot. And also I included some JavaScript. Now, that's fairly significant because with Django, the JavaScript doesn't need to be rendered by Python. It can be rendered by the web server itself. So Nginx just needs to know where to find the JavaScript. Django doesn't have to do all that. So let's just to prove that it is SSL HTTPS. There you go. Connection is secure, and that little padlock is what took me several hours to get to. So let's go back to the tutorial. I just wrap up. So really, if you don't get anything from this video, hopefully you will at least get some confidence to know that this tutorial is sufficient to get you up and running with a secure HTTPS website using Django on a virtual private server. And I'm recommending Webdock because I like them, and so far it's been a joy to use their servers, and they are fast, very fast. So here is the overview of what's actually been set up, or what the tutorial talks you through. Internet into the Nginx server on port 443 for SSL, HTTPS. Gunicorn translates the Python output into something that Nginx can then send back to the client. There's lots of tables here with firewall rules that you can apply. They are specific to AWS, I believe, for this tutorial. If you are deploying to Ubuntu on a VPS, you don't need to do those parts, but it helps if you know how to do sudo UFW. It helps if you know how to edit the firewall on a Ubuntu box. Basically, copy all of their examples, but what you'll need to do is just change wherever you see supersecure.codes, which is their fictitious or maybe their real website, you just need to substitute your domain name. The full stop at the start is basically a wild character, so what it means is you can have either www.example.com or just example.com. There's quite a few places where you need to set up logs, and the two key things to become familiar with and comfortable with editing and setting up and restarting are / etc nginx site / available. You will undoubtedly change directory and edit stuff in there several times. Then we can see testing Nginx configuration, and there it says OK. When I ran it, because I was on quite a wide screen, I didn't actually know it was working because I saw this on the left-hand side, and I was expecting to see an OK about you know, that far across. In actual fact, it was right in the far opposite corner of the screen. So yeah, just watch out for that. You can also install something called HTTPie to test your code with. It's a command line way of testing what you would otherwise need to test with the browser. Obviously, with a browser, you've got the possibility of needing to do a refresh or just browser-specific anomalies, ad blocker, and all that nonsense. So HTTPie is good. Yeah, the Django part. Sorry, the JavaScript part is to demonstrate how static files get served and where they get served from. Again, here, supersecure.codes, you need to substitute that with the name of your domain. So if your domain is example.co.uk, you would put example.co.uk. Just one thing, another thing to watch out for, when you are naming your folder to store your static files, don't call it the same as your domain name, because you don't really want a folder called example.co.uk. So just call it example. But just remember that sometimes you'll need to be going to a folder called example, and other times you'll be putting in things like example.co.uk. So just be very clear whether you are going to just be very consistent whether you're using a folder called the name of your domain or whether you're calling it just after the this bit. What is that? Is that the netlock? Is it the netlock? That's the host, the domain name. Yeah. Python manage.py collect static. You'll need to run that, and you should see I had 131 static files copied across. So it's basically copying from Django's static folder. It's copying those files across to Nginx's static or Nginx's static folder, because Nginx will serve those files without having to go via Django. Another important thing, in the settings.py file, which is a built-in Django file which you will get when you start a new project with Django, set debug to false. You don't want debug running on production server. it's not. That's a bad security flaw. Restart Nginx, sudo systemctl restart Nginx. You'll get used to typing that a few times. Make your site production ready with HTTPS. This is the good bit. So you've got conf files for Nginx, you've got conf files for Gunicorn. The Nginx is always etc. Nginx. This is nginx.conf. You'll also have the Nginx sites available files. So yeah, just always know in your head which file you're editing, because you will end up editing numerous text files. Certbot is the final thing. Certbot allows you to, let's just read it. I'll read this off the screen rather than giving you my dumbed down version. So Certbot creates a certificate with an RSA key size of 4096 bytes. Once you've walked through the steps, you should see a message like the following, where it will say successfully received certificate. What Certbot actually does is it edits the Nginx conf file for you. So some tutorials you'll see people manually editing that file, but if you use Certbot, it knows where the Nginx files are and it will do it for you. So yeah, don't panic that you have to edit these huge config files. Certbot does some of the hard work for you. And again, yeah, this is the last bit where you kind of tell Nginx to listen SSL certificates include. Don't fully understand all that, but I know what it's doing. I wouldn't want to type that from scratch, but you got the certificate, you got the key, you got an include. So you got an include for SSL options, and you got SSL DH, which is Diffie-Hellman parameters, and yeah, a PEM file and a conf file, PEM. Ultimately, you want to see a padlock, and to test that your JavaScript is, test that your static files are working. Sounds wrong having JavaScript, which is kind of dynamic, in a folder called static, but yeah, if you think about it, you want the static files are the files which don't get changed by Django. Sorry, back to the tutorial. One last thing, the redirects. So you've got it redirecting. If you send HTTP request, it will know that, and then it will do a redirect, and it will redirect from HTTP with a 307 temporary redirect, and it will redirect from HTTP to HTTPS, which is exactly what you want, because you want the padlock there and you want happy customers. So I think, without boring you with the finer points of this tutorial, this will do for this video. But understand that just because Heroku makes it easy, or did make it easy, or Cloud and Docker make it easy, sometimes making something easy, you will skip things and you won't really understand how something works. You'll just see something as kind of click, click, go. And if you're wanting to kind of go further, have a career with this type of stuff, then it's probably better to get your hands really dirty, spend 3 hours doing this tutorial, stay up late at night, get tired, drink too much coffee. I'm not saying that's healthy in the long run, but if you just do it once in a while, burn some midnight oil. Repetition. If you've seen CodeMonkey King with his new channel, Natural Flow, although you want to be doing stuff with flow and without a rigid system or framework telling you what to do, if you want to be good at something, repetition is obviously the way to go. That's fairly intuitive. So yeah, Webdock, realpython.com. I'll put the links in the description. If you like these type of videos, let me know. These videos are more let's say real world, rather than doing something with, say, a to-do list, which you quite often see. I know this particular page is only showing coming soon, but it's real world because it's HTTPS and it's using a VPS server. In future, I'll edit this and put in some block content, etc., and delve a bit more into Django because, as I say, I'm not in the business of learning frameworks, but if I have a specific need for a potential business idea or a potential little earner, money-making scheme, then I wouldn't say reluctantly, but I will use frameworks where I think and where I've done research and I believe that they are the optimum way to go. I wouldn't say, I think I'll leave it at that. Say some of you would be Django fans, some people like Flask, some people don't like either, but yeah, just imagine you need to create a website for a reason. What would you use? Would you use PHP? Would you use Django? Would you use Flask? If you've got any thoughts, drop some comments. And if you think, oh, this is really the hard work way, why don't you just use AWS and just use Docker? Then I'd also be interested to hear, because if it is that easy and then it allows you more time to write code and be creative, then yeah, I'm all ears. But sometimes I just like to do things the hard way because you can really get right to the get right down and dirty with some config files and make stuff, break stuff. I think breaking things is really important. So you will try to get something working. So copy stuff, break it, get it working, probably break it again, get it working a second time, document it. It's just part of the reason I make these videos is to document it for me, but also if it helps someone else, then so much the better. And yeah, Webdock, I can't speak highly enough of them. Their servers are fast. Their control panel dashboard is very clean. Everything does what it says on the tin. There's no nonsense, and the performance is good. You've got the backups. It's all carbon neutral. You've got Certbot, which you can install, so you don't need to buy £25 SSL certificates from GoDaddy or Ionos or whatever. Yeah. On that note, I'm off, so have a nice day. See you soon. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah.